Oh my God, we're going to be talking about Arnhem Black Tuesday, aren't we?
We are.
We are.
And with the guy
With
who
the
did
guy. Bo, great to see you.
Yes.
Even better to see Al because we've worked on this for a couple weeks. There it is. There it is.
There we go, boys and girls.
In your best American accent, go ahead and read that title for us.
Al Murray, Arnhem, Black Tuesday. The classic battle told as never before.
I was telling Bo just before we got started that I'm listening to an audiobook right now, and that is how the British reader is doing all the American dialogue, and it is painful to get through.
I can only imagine. I'm so sorry.
As the Marines entered Guadalcanal, they crossed Alligator Creek.
Fantastic.
Oh,
divided by a common language and all that. Marvelous.
Well, Al, welcome back to Homebrew History. Great to have you.
Boys. Thank you.
And congratulations on Arnhem Black Tuesday. I ordered my copy from UK Amazon because I wasn't going to wait around for an American edition. It just felt right.
Fair. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's happening with the American edition. I have a feeling we'll see how it goes here, and then someone will make a decision. But it's incredibly exciting to have this book out, and also as anxiety packed and a thing. I signed off it in kind of May. Often it in kind of May, June, and then I've laid awake at night going, "Oh God, that bit, have I gone too far? Have I got that wrong? Why did I leave that out? I should have left it in, and all this sort of stuff." Which is, after all, the job of the author is omission as much as it is inclusion, and I don't know. I mean, people are being very nice about it at the moment, but I'm imagining fury chimps to come at me on the internet at some point and said, "On page 402, you say this, and it's completely wrong." Or, "How dare you besmirch the reputation of this fine august military body," and all that sort of stuff. But hopefully, I haven't actually done that. And in the introduction of the book, I get all my caveats and excuses in early, so that hopefully the reader sees where I'm coming from.
So the book is primarily about one day, September the 19th. And how do you take something that's as big as Market Garden, and really, and when you downsize it, as big as the battle at Arnhem, and really condense down to just the one day? And what makes you pick that single day, as opposed to, why not talk about the drops? Were they all successful? Why not talk about, the escapes on the way out?
Well, this is it. This is it. What I was really trying to do was I've been very interested in this battle a very long time. Since I was a kid, really. And, my father got me into it through his time as a parachute engineer, and he knew people who'd been there and all this sort of stuff. And I've always thought at some point I'm going to have to grasp the nettle and write about a battle. So it might as well be the Battle of Arnhem, because it's the one I sort of know the most about, kind of. Although actually, in the process of writing this book, I've realized that thing, when you start to really look into something, a vanishingly small amount about it, and or your confidence evaporates with every word you type. But I thought, I've got to come at this from a different angle and do something different. And it was about 6-7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, James Holland, my good friend Jim, who I do the podcast with, invited me. This is before We Have Ways to Make You Talk. Invited me to come and talk at his history festival at Chalk. And he said, "Do you want to do Arnhem?" And I thought, "Yeah, I do, but I don't want to do the whole thing, because the thing is it is complicated. There's lots of it, and also it's packed with controversy. And in a way, I'm not so interested in the controversy, or the standard controversies that sit around it. So I thought, well, I'll just do one day and end with the what happened next question." Because I think one of the problems very often with this, with an event like this, which has been, absolutely poured over in every kind of detail, is people tend to forget that, Tuesday, the 19th of September, 1944 was a today at one point. It was a day where they didn't know what was coming tomorrow. And so I really wanted to have a thing that felt like that. And then the reason I picked the Tuesday is because you can argue at the start of the day, they seem to have options. And at the end of the day, they definitely don't in the town of Arnhem. And you know, the landings are sort of half a day anyway, because they don't land till after lunch and into the afternoon, you know, and the second day is kind of inconclusive. But the third day, they start, like I said, they start with plans and what look like options, and at the end of the day, they clearly don't have any. And also, it's the day where, and the Polish drops notwithstanding, it's the day where they have the most assets in town at their disposal. The division, First Airborne Division. So it felt like the day where, okay, so this is the day, because you've got new people, a fresh lift has arrived on the Monday afternoon. There's a decision to be made about what to do with them and what you do in terms of maybe trying to relieve the bridge or deciding that that's best not bothered with. And that felt like there's your dramatic, or there's your point, your hinge point, if you want. And I know a lot of people say it's doomed before that, and it's doomed even before they leave, but they certainly don't think that at midnight on Tuesday morning. And I wanted to try and think like they do, where they don't know it's the, you know, Montgomery's Folly and all those things that we now think about it. I wanted to say what's it like when you don't know what's going on as well, you know, because they didn't know what was going on.
You're writing history without the hindsight, basically.
And in fact, trying to show the hindsight they had. So a big thing that, you know, the big only arguments about the market garden, and in particular the British component of market, which is the airborne side. There's a selection of the drop zones, and they're in the wrong place or whatever. But if you look at First Airborne's history, they're desperate to land in tidy order. They're desperate to land where they can put their gliders down all together in one lovely big dollop, and then unload them in good order and at leisure, and then figure out you know, which way to go and where the enemy are, rather than arrive like they did in Sicily the year before, in the drink, you know, with loads of people being killed and in complete disarray and all this sort of stuff. They've had, you know, First Airborne have had their share of disarray, so they don't want a repeat of that with the landings. And so I wanted Sicily is as much part of the market garden story as anything else. So each time I introduce someone for the sort of air landing component, talk about their experience in Sicily, talk about why on the Sunday they're arriving in daylight, and they're delighted to be arriving in daylight, and they're delighted to arrive in good order. They're excited because it feels like an exercise. And how does that then inform what you do the next 2 days? And I was trying to capture their hindsight, so their experience and lessons that they'd learned, rather than go, well, you know, if only they'd known. And another thing I've done to sort of try and create that sense of being in the present is that none of the German decisions are in the book. None of the German formations are named, even except when they capture Panzer SS guys. They go, oh gosh, these guys are Panzer SS. I don't say, and at this point, you know, over Grippensturmführer so-and-so decided to do this, or orders came down from Model, you know, in Army Group B. There's none of that, because they don't know that. And by the same token, they don't know what's happening to the south of them with Second Army. They don't know what US 82nd Airborne are up to. That, you know, and they're not in the book because they didn't know. And, you know, Erk making decisions with any of that stuff in mind, he's thinking, oh God, that road's blocked. What are we going to do? And so that's what I've tried to do with the book.
So Al, you know, you do bring up a good point, is that the more that you read, the more you research, the more you look into things, the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah.
And I think I've come to the point that all I know is that I don't know. And it seems like throughout my graduate school career, I've always had the one big thing, you know, told to me is narrow down your topic. And you've narrowed it down to 1 day. And yet there's still complications. So Al, tell us a little bit about, you know, your lead up to picking Black Tuesday.
Well, really, I mean, this is a lot. Part of this is to do with the fact that if you read an Arnhem book, and there was a review of Anthony Beevor's book about Arnhem from a couple of years ago, and it's a great book, you know, and it's all in there, and he also does the aftermath. That's it. He does the aftermath for the people in the Netherlands as well as a big part of the story, which is the other thing that's really brilliant about his book about Crete, is he did the same thing, whereas he looked at what happens next, you know, what happens afterwards. But even there was a review of that said, and this is amazing, even of him, you know, and he's a tremendous writer, a review of him that said, Part of the problem with the story of the Battle of Arnhem is after the Tuesday, the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the Monday, the remaining 6 days there in their redoubt in the perimeter at Oosterbeek, is the days are kind of similar. And so it's hard to sustain a narrative. It's hard to sort of to build a story out of that. And I am very interested in, I want the book to be a thing you want to page turn. And if the Friday afternoon, they're mortared again, and there's a probing attack by, we don't know, whatever. It just kind of feel. And even Beaver's book was sort of kind of criticized for being a little bit repetitive because the action is repetitive. So I wanted to avoid that. I wanted to completely not have that to deal with. And then also by being freed of that narrative, you can have a chapter about the gunnery. What guns have they brought with them? What have they? Because always, if you read a standard Arnhem history, you go, well, of course, paratroopers are lightly armored, right? You think, yeah, fine. Well,
what does that mean?
What does that mean? What does that mean? And what does that mean relative to everything else? And one of the things that's key to the Allied way of winning in Northwest Europe is firepower, is artillery firepower. That's how you don't try and fight your way into a built-up area until it's been absolutely plastered with every gun available up to corps level, or even army level, if you can. The British have these army group Royal Artilleries that are additional guns attached to their army level artillery. So if you're in an infantry division, if you're a captain infantry division, you can get everyone on the net. You can call up your division's artillery, the next door division's artillery, the corps, all the way up to corps, and then army group if you and beyond. And could deploy hundreds of guns if you're lucky, if things work out. 1st Airborne Division never, ever have that option because they can't take that with them. So the minute they get into trying to attack, they aren't able, first of all, to keep the enemy's head down by plastering them with lots and lots of shells. And then if the Germans do then counterattack, destroy the counterattack with artillery intervention again. So they can't suppress, they can't deny. They've got none of those things. So immediately everything's that much more difficult. And that I always think that in the books I've read, that could do with explaining. That could do with the actual depth of their predicament. And so many of the Arnhem factors are that they're able to do Market Garden is a fruit of Allied success. But in the process, they're denied all the means that have delivered those fruit. So they haven't got the air cover that everyone's had up to this point. They haven't had the battlefield curated by air power. So all the bridges into Arnhem, all the roads into Arnhem haven't been interdicted for weeks on end and aren't being interdicted in the same way that they are in Normandy. So all the things that have got you to the point where you can do this great, daring, imaginative operation, those things are not part of it. And I always think that for me needs laying out and parsing and explaining and saying they ain't got the firepower. Because then in one of the accounts from the Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday morning, one of the company commanders goes, "We ain't got any guns. This should be done with at least 2 regiments of guns, probably a division, like a corps level of artillery, and there isn't any. So, oh shit, basically." And I think that really needs spelling out. And then because then it makes you think, well, why are they're making some decisions here? They're writing checks they can't cash in terms of what they're trying to do in terms of their assaults. And who's making those decisions and where have those decisions sprung from? Which I think is often, again, a thing that kind of gets rushed out of the way in the narrative. And also, go on, sorry.
It's interesting that you bring that up because one of the big criticisms of the 101st Airborne in Market Garden by John McManus is that Taylor doesn't bring artillery, but Gavin does.
Yeah.
Gavin brings artillery and is effectively able to cover and defend the area that he's allotted because he has guns, and Taylor's scrambling to get artillery in the next glider lift and the next airborne drop.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like 1st Airborne really brings any or prioritizes any artillery whatsoever for 6
they bring their light regiment. Well, they bring their light regiment, which is 4 batteries of the same gun, the 75mm howitzer. But when you look at its firepower, it's a 12.5-pound round, so it's half the round that the standard British field gun, the 25-pounder, fires. And also, you're 60 miles from any prospect of, 101st at least, pretty soon under Second Army's artillery umbrella. They're,
Mhm.
you know, those guns come online quite quickly for them. So you can kind of see why you might have made that calculation. You think,
Mhm.
well, we're going to get relieved straight away. There'll be guns and the gunnery. And of course they aren't. So there isn't. Whereas the first airborne, they just can't do it. And they're very, very ambitious in terms of the attacks they're putting in, particularly on the Tuesday morning, particularly the area in the woods north of the railway line, north of Oosterbeek. That, you know, in Normandy, you'd have never sent companies, battalions of infantry across the kind of countryside they're going across without vast preparatory barrages, and then without then, you know, firepower to follow up when the Germans counterattack. And they just aren't doing it. They can't do it. They aren't doing it. So why they put themselves in that kind of danger? And that I think I wanted to make sure that we explained that. And then of course the other issue is, let's say 2 of the gliders go down in the sea on the way there. You're already short. You're already undermanned. You're undermanned. You're undergunned, and you're underpowered. And immediately, you know, the fragility of the airborne operation is the thing. And I came away kind of thinking they shouldn't have bothered with the guns at all and taken stacks more mortars, because it's mortars that are the thing that the Germans are using so effectively against them. But you know, with all Market Garden, coulda, woulda, shoulda, and
so this episode is going to come out a day after, because we had a discussion with Marty Morgan about weapons and about what was brought into Market Garden, and he said that if the British were thinking about it, they should have brought more mortars and they should have brought more Piats. Another 100 rounds of Piat ammunition, you know, you might be looking at 4 days as opposed to 3 days. Well,
this is it, but also there's the very interesting question of fire discipline, right? And this goes to the fact that you know, they're on their first airborne division, and you know, these aborted operations that come before Market Garden are planned to varying degrees and all that, but they have 16 operations mooted, and some of them planned in full and some of them not before Market Garden. And these guys are absolutely desperate to kill Germans, right? They are absolutely pumped for it. And you know, unlike 82nd, 101st, they haven't just done D-Day, because 6th Airborne Division, the other British Airborne Division, have covered that. Right. And they feel like they've missed out. They feel like they've missed out. They feel like they've really have been overlooked, and they feel like they've been sort of passed over. And so when they get to Arnhem, so in particular at the bridge, you know, there's the big battle, but there's an assault on the bridge at like 4 o'clock in the morning, an armored assault on the bridge at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then there's the big sort of headline one at 10, where the Germans come, Graebner with his Panzer SS reconnaissance battalion. They come over the bridge, and it's a great big firefight, and it goes for 2 or 3 hours. It's not 5 minutes like in the movie. It's 2 or 3 hours, and it's a great big battle. And everyone is all the paras on that bridge. They're absolutely filling their boots. They're having a time of their lives killing Germans. And after that, and of course they are, because they think they're going to be relieved. They think, right, Second Army will be here today, tomorrow. Why not? Let's have our fun, right? And the obviously the problem with that is then they aren't relieved, and they're starting to run low on ammunition, and they start to, ammunition becomes a problem, you know, within 24 hours of them seizing the bridge, taking the bridge. And so by the end of the Tuesday, they're really low on, they're pretty much out of Piat ammunition, and the fields of fire for the 6-pounders, and being in the open with the 6-pounders, too dangerous, because the German mortar fire is, you know, absolutely zeroed in by this point. And so yeah, I mean, what's his name? Dickie Lonsdale, who ends up commanding Major Dickie Lonsdale, who ends up commanding the sort of lower eastern side of the Oosterbeek perimeter in the second phase of the battle, after the sort of assault phase ends. He says, you know, if we'd had enough Piat bombs, we'd have kept them off till Christmas. That like Piats in street fighting, if you can hear them coming, you know, they can't see you. And the Piat's a brilliant street fighting weapon, because it doesn't have a big report, doesn't go crash bang, set fire to curtains. You know, you can fire at someone from an attic and they'll never know you're there. And you know, so yeah, more Piat bombs, more mortars. But even, you know, the average glider load is 8 men per horse a glider. You could have, if you decided, you know what, let's not bother with the field hospital, let's not bother with the service corps guys, let's not bother with some of the anti-tank weapons. You could have taken a whole other brigade of infantry to Arnhem with the glider numbers. So, you know, there's another, you just flood the place with people rather than think, you know, because this is sort of, I mean, obviously that was never going to happen, but because what the British are trying to do is you know, the First Airborne is a facsimile of a regular infantry division in kind of every way, apart from the fact they're running light. You know, they haven't got anything of anything. And yeah, ammunition is the, you know, they take. I mean, I can go on about this forever because the glider load, see, the glider load, every glider load is an opportunity cost. So every decision you make about what to put in the glider means you can't take something else. Every single decision is this sort of giant continuum of opportunity cost. And of course the Americans, and I think this is very interesting. The Americans during the, you know, all of their airborne operations, and in fact in their sort of regular infantry component, are quite happy with the 57mm anti-tank gun, the 6-pounder, or content to put up with it. I'm sure quite happy is the wrong. You know, as the British have ended up with the 17-pounder, which weighs twice as much. It's an absolute monster, you know, but can knock anything out a mile away. And they take those to Arnhem. But the thing is one of them only fires 2 rounds in the whole of the 9-day battle. So think of the opportunity cost. That Hamilcar glider, the super heavy British glider they used for that, could have taken, you know, could have taken tons and tons of mortar ammunition or tons and tons of rifle ammunition or whatever. But instead they take an anti-tank gun that they only fire 2 rounds from it. And you sort of think, when you get into those, you know, and that's one of the advantages of writing it from this approach, is you get into those weeds, you look at the supply side of things. Everything's an opportunity cost. So, Jesus, God knows how you make those decisions. Because at work the other way around, you know, I'd be going, well, they should have taken that 17-pounder so that they could have fired it twice that afternoon and stopped that French flamethrower tank that the Germans are using. You know what I mean? And I think the complexity of these operations is really interesting. And the sort of irony or the paradox of it, the complexity of the planning, of the manifest, of the air plan, of all that. And then the minute you land, because you're relying on surprise, everything changes. Literally everything changes.
Which is a lot more detailed, certainly, than just summing it up by saying, out of ammunition, God save the king. And it's like, okay, but how did you get to that point?
Exactly.
You know, what decision was made that got you to the point where 3 days later?
Yeah, well, you got there, but because you all got overexcited on the Monday morning is one of the arguably, right? And of course, one of the things that I really took from looking at it on this level is there is a moment in the afternoon, and what's really interesting about this is actually you know, you look at all sorts of different sources, and so there's the Major General Roy Urquhart's memoir of the battle, which is from 14 years later, from the late 50s. And he talks about a moment on the Tuesday afternoon after the supply drop comes in, where the supply drop goes wrong at like 1500 hours with sort of 8 minutes of pandemonium. He talks about seeing men running away and having to do something about it, right? But he goes out with his chief of staff and he's very direct with them. You know, he says, I was very direct with them and, you know, had to restrain them and all this sort of thing. And I found empty weapons pits and all this, but we got that under control, right? And he witnesses that, but he writes about it. And I think it's really amazing that he writes about that, you know, just over a decade later. That's an interesting thing for him to do, right? Then if you look at one of the war diaries, 4th Parachute Brigade, there is a moment where the brigade major threatens to shoot any man who runs, right? And that's a big moment, or a big thing to have to say, and a big thing to put in the diary, right? Because you know,
normally you don't want to put the nasty side of things in your war diary.
Exactly. Very often British war diaries are, but the chaps did awfully well under great pressure. Or you know, the Germans got into our position, but we were able to get them back out again. And they're as sort of laconic as that. But in that, so that's in the 4th Parachute Brigade war diary. And then the other source that I found really interesting was the Cornelius Ryan archive at Ohio University, which is open. You can just go and look at it. And it's all the questionnaires that he sent out to people who he'd found out that they were in 1st Airborne Division. Would you like to right, and someone from his publisher wrote to everyone, and it's a questionnaire. And then lots of people sent back, 30 pages typed up of their experience of the whole thing, right? Or 10 pages, like little stories, little mini memoirs. And in one of those, one of the guys talks about the commander of the light artillery regiment. He talks about going forward and stopping a panic. And in fact, he sees one of the guys, this guy, Major Robert Kane, who then was awarded a Victoria Cross after the battle, and is the only Victoria Cross winner who survived Battle of Arnhem. All the other four were killed. And he says, I saw Robert Kane at that moment, and he certainly didn't look like a future VC winner. So basically saying, guys lost the plot, But that, for me, that is the thing where you go, blimey, this is good, because Kane then goes on to perform acts of insane valor, right? He's an absolute, with the Piat weapon, an absolute tank killing machine, but from Wednesday onwards. So he doesn't do it in my book, right? And
Tuesday, bit running scared. Wednesday, find us there.
How the hell did these people find that in themselves? And that's sort of why I wanted to end with what would happen tomorrow, because we all know what happened tomorrow. They then hung on for 6 days under the most appalling pressure, against terrible odds, hung on, stuck it out. And so that was the other kind of literary effect of ending at the end of the Tuesdays, is then to write a postscript that says, but they hung on for 6 days. And but we were in Arnhem the other day, James and I, we'd gone to walk the ground there. And we're in the Storied Hotel, which was
that a subtle plug for Walking the Ground, the YouTube channel?
I mean, not that subtle. Now you've highlighted it for me, but thanks very much. Great job. You guys are real pros. Basically, we're sat in there, and there's a bunch of English guys the other side of the Storied, and that was one of the dressing stations in the battle. Although it's a new building, obviously. And they're bikers from the north of England, or from the Midlands, rather. And they've been on a biking holiday because their great uncle had been at Arnhem. And so we get talking and all this and get chatting, and it's really nice. And then the bloke WhatsApps me his uncle's war diary. So there it is, and it's page after page that he scanned. And in that war diary, which I've never seen before and is not a thing that's kind of out there as far as I can tell, is the story. It's identical, because this bloke's uncle was driving around one of the officers as helping him out as a signalman, driving a jeep, getting him from A to B around his gun positions. And they had an incident where 30 guys are running away. The officer goes, pull over. He pulls over in front of them, stands on the bonnet and goes, right, dig yourselves in, clean your weapons, stop, have a smoke, have a cup of tea, brew up, get yourselves together, make yourselves useful. And what was really brilliant about that was to get confirmation completely from out of the ether of this moment. And the officer's response to it, and then the officer's ability to turn the men around. It's just that is the factor that, again, I think I have read about that, and you do read about it, but to put it as a third of the day or it's an hour of it, so it's one proper portion of the day, a proper fraction of the day where that's a proper weighted part of the story, I think is really is the advantage or a byproduct of writing the book about just the one day. You get to be a bit tangential, you get to step back and not have to go. And then on Thursday, the Panzer Group Alvord and Camp,
right, rather than letting it be meanwhile there was a morale crisis, which was helped by the officers, and then you move on to the next paragraph and you're on to the next day.
Exactly. And they do all write about fear. The officers do all write about fear. And I very often think that we don't write about that or talk about that enough in military history, that we kind of price it into the accounts. I think we don't talk about and what they thought of fear at the time, because the other thing, Urquhart also does this thing in his memoir where he sort of references in passing Lord Moran, who was Churchill's personal physician in the war, but who after the First World War had made a real name for himself because he wrote a book about morale, about battle fatigue, and the idea of the reservoir of courage that every man has that can run dry, and all that sort of stuff. And he'd lectured at the Staff College between the war and the British Army. And so his ideas about fear and morale are completely mainstream. They're the thing everyone's thinking, and the way everyone's, talking about what you do about it. And so, you've got to then look at what he's saying, and you've got to look at what his experience is, so you can understand what Urquhart means, which explains Urquhart's action that he takes. And that's the advantage of not having to move on to Friday. I've got the sort of freedom of maneuver, as it were, unlike them.
So Al, I think one of the primary effects that your book has is it is a little bit more of a micro history on a macro topic. Yeah. I think that's something that Joey and I have talked a lot about with historians, writers on the show, is that we don't need another book that's a bullet stopper on the Battle of the Bulge. We don't need another D-Day bullet stopper. And we pick on our friend PCA from time to time. I always make the joke. I said I'm almost 99% certain that Teddy Roosevelt had either sand and steel or snow and steel. Right now,
stronger than Kevlar. Stronger than Kevlar.
Bo, be honest. He has a King Tiger's front armor plate.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, to keep it on topic, that thing could definitely rival a Piat round. Without a doubt. But Al, man, dude, what's with your book being a little bit more of a micro history, what do you hope to inspire for future historians, future writers, future generations to get out of your book?
Well, I don't know. The thing I really want is it to feel like, because one of the things is, when I was writing the events up, and before you're kind of like trying to hang things on it, it's really confusing what's going on, right? It's incredibly confusing, and making sense of it, trying to use the diaries to make sense of it, timings all disagree. It's really confusing. So at one point I thought, well, I'm just going to embrace this. And if this next 3-page explanation of what's going on is confusing, so be it, right? because it was confusing. And there's a passage where I talk about how there's an incident at the bridge where they think they're where the Germans wheel out a howitzer or a gun, or is it a big mortar? And there's 3 accounts that seem to be talking about the same set of events, but they disagree on basically all the particulars. So maybe it's 3 different events, but it takes on enough of the shape that it feels like the same event. And inevitably, the engineers say, well, we fixed that guy with a Bren gun. The artillery commanding officer goes, well, I called in a Mike target strike and dealt with it. His radio operator, who doesn't like him, says, no, the mortar section dealt with that. It wasn't my officer who I don't rate, And are they the same incident, or are they 3 different incidents? And the problem is, I don't know. We'll never know. And maybe there are some historians who are prepared to say that they do know, and they're prepared to put a sort of minute timing on it. But I want to talk about how confusing it must be. I want to talk about the grey areas and the gaps, because that was their experience. And the thing I really, really wanted to, as well as the sort of Baroque detail of supply scales and the things and opportunity costs and all that, I wanted to somehow, what's it like advancing on a tree line when you don't have an artillery chute coming in? And and fortunately there's enough people who wrote well about that. So Peter Waddy is one of the company commanders, says, we didn't know where we were going. I knew that A company were on my left flank, C company fire support on my right. That's it. And such is the lot of the company commander. And that, I think, very often you've got to try and reflect that a bit more, or try and lean into that as the reality of the experience. Because I've never been in combat. I have no intention of ever being in combat. And I'm eternally grateful that neither A nor B has ever come to pass, right? But I am fascinated as to what it must be like, and the sort of the noise, the chaos, not knowing where you are, the sound, because one of the things I've also made sure in the book is that only if someone says, and then a Panzer III came at me, they just tend to say a Panzer. Half that. Maybe it's a Stug. They don't know, because you stick your head around the corner and, oh God, right, there's a tank there. Yeah. I can hear it coming.
Tank.
What do we do? Bring up the Fiat. Is there any way of getting it to come down onto the 6-pounder? Is the 6-pounder we can bring up? That's what you're thinking. There we go. You're not thinking, oh, it's a Stug 3 with the with that the Stug 3G with that modification on that. You know, you are not thinking that. And I think sometimes you get a bit too much of that in accounts. You know, I'd rather know that there's one brilliant account that one of the doctors I followed wrote, a guy called Stuart Mawson, and that I used. He wrote this amazing account, and because he's not a soldier, he's a medic, he's a doctor. He says when there's a big mortar barrage comes in, he says the men stumbled from the mortar barrage like animals fleeing a forest fire. Right, and you're right. Now I know what it's like. Rather than mortar barrage came in and I ordered the men to retreat, which is the alternate version.
I was going to say I always make the joke is that it doesn't matter, you know, what the artillery is. Everything's an 88, everything's an MG42, everything's a Tiger.
Yeah.
The only thing that we wait for is that you're wearing your brown pants.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the other thing though, and I sort of actually, this is a thought that's come to me since the book sort of was complete, is if you know, our recent wars that we have fought, the US and the UK, in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, very much remind me of in lots of ways of Arnhem. And hear me out, because what the Germans decide to do, the Germans do not care about the lives of their own soldiers. They do not care. All of the people running the battle from the German side just pump blokes in, automatic weapons, hold the enemy up, strike him any way you can, try and disrupt him, try and screw him up. There's no great German tactical art to any of this, or you know, all the things that people have talked about. They're really good at organizing their headquarters and drawing up their resources in a panic, which is, I think, the hallmark of the German military in the last 2 years of the war, certainly last 3 years of the war.
But there's no tactical umbrella. There's no strategic umbrella. It's just throw guys in.
Well, if it's Luftwaffe clerks,
right?
You aren't saying, okay, guys, remember what we practiced with with our advancing, you know, fire maneuver. That isn't going on, right? They're pumping people into it, but they're willing to give their lives. And that's why it made me think about Afghanistan and Iraq. If you got someone with an automatic weapon whose boss doesn't particularly mind if you're killed, and actually you don't particularly mind if you're killed, you can hold up the best equipped, best trained soldiers in the world all day long if you want to, right?
Yep.
And you know, you look at our experience in Afghanistan, where you've got and your experience, there's the best equipped armies in the world, and a bloke with an AK-47 can cause them all sorts of problems. And this, of course, one of the things is also in the Arnhem battle is the Germans are beginning to use assault rifles by this stage of the war, which are particularly effective in street fighting. And you know, that is a thing that the British don't have. They don't even have an automatic rifle, the British paratroopers. They've got a bolt action, the smelly, the Mark IV rifle. You know, and so even in those terms, they're behind the German. You know, and it's the German whose officer doesn't mind if his men are killed, and the German who thinks he's defending his fatherland from an ideological enemy, which I think a lot of them do actually, and we have to sort of be prepared to admit that now. But that's so thinking about what's Arnhem, you know, what does Arnhem offer clues to the modern experience? I think it might even be that, you know, obviously we're done with that now. We've given up on such adventures for the time being, but it just strikes me that that's the sort of one of the things. And then that firepower, which is the great lesson of the Ukraine war, it's all about firepower. And they don't have it. The guys in Arnhem don't have it.
So kind of just touch on some of your sourcing. So you talked a bit about how you got war diaries. You get a letter after the book is done, a war diary after the book is done.
Let's load of that. I mean, because one of the great fables, stories that's sort of part of the sort of Arnhem mythology is the maroon berets that were dropped in the supply drop on the.
Marty was talking about that. Yeah.
Okay. Now, and the scene in the film is a guy goes to get a supply container that's dropped short. He goes to go get it, and he runs back, and he's killed by a sniper on the way back, and the container pops open, and it's maroon berets. Now, the thing is with this, I've always just thought that can't be true. It's too good to be true. It's too ripe with symbolism for it to possibly be really what happened, right? But when you push into it, we do know for sure that they drop pips and crowns, rank badges. We know that. And then the RASC people, the Royal Army Service Corps people, said, "Yeah, well, you know, yeah, that was in the clothing scale, supply scale, and all that." And then you do have one of the company commanders witnesses it, and his book is a novelization of the battle, but it's one of those novelizations where basically he's changed Ted's name to Fred, like everyone's identifiable in it and all that. And in fact, in a later edition, he said, "By the way, this is that person. This is that person. That's my sergeant major." The medic disagrees. The medic claims the thing I said happened never happened, but I'm absolutely certain of my memory of it. You know, so there's all that in it. But he finds red berets, and his account's really interesting because he finds rounds for anti-tank guns first. He's an infantryman, so they're no use to him. He finds 6-pounder rounds, and then he finds the berets, or his men find the berets, and pips and crowns, right? And the interesting thing is, and he then thinks to himself, well, you know what? This is annoying, right? Because what we could really do now is some rifle rounds, some Sten gun ammunition. This is annoying, but I see why they've done it. Because a huge part of our martial identity as parachutists, as paratroopers, is the maroon beret. Because they, you know, and whether this is what's so interesting. This about how soldiers think. They've convinced themselves the Germans are frightened of people in red berets because of the fighting in Africa. They're the Red Devils after all. You know, die Roten Teufel. Right. Although there's an argument that the one school of thought says they're called the Red Devils because of the red dust in Tunisia. So in North Africa, so maybe it isn't the berets. But the point is, the men think they're important. They're part of their martial identity. They're part of their fighting culture. So you might drop them on the men as a thing to make sure they've got them, and that you might do that, right? And certainly Powell thinks that. He thinks they're useless, but he can understand the rationale, which I think is really interesting. And also that afternoon, you know, when things are really hitting the fan, he gets his, you know, the pips and crowns, he gets his men to cut their rank badges off because the sergeants are being sniped at. And they've got, you know, the stripes on a British Army sergeant in the Second World War, great big things like they're on a sleeve of a red.
They may as well be highlighter yellows that say, "I am a sergeant."
Absolutely. So he's made his men cut them off, and he's made his officers cut their pips and crowns off their shoulders because they wore them on their shoulders. And so he's going to need more at some point. So you can see why they've dropped them, because he won't be the only person who's ordered his men to do that. So I basically kind of satisfied myself that they did drop these maroon berets, right? That it did happen. It's not just a too good to be true story that speaks to the futility of the operation of war and, you know, 1,500 words on the futility of war. There we go. No, and then last week, someone emails Jim going, "Your friend's just written an Arnhem book. Perhaps you'd be interested in seeing this about the red berets. I've been through all the supply scale and I don't think they were there." You know, you're like, send me that book, send me that email.
Where were you 7 months ago?
Exactly. God damn it. You know, like, I mean, because I'd have a look at that and I'd try and work it out. Because you know, we know a load of the other, you know, they sent 90 pairs of pajamas. We do know he's capable of, you know, within the clothing thing, probably. But anyway, it's just that thing. So when you publish a book, you get, and you're thinking, well, maybe for the second edition, you know, if this is a big hit, I'll include that story from the bloke's uncle, and maybe we'll have another look at the berets from another angle. But you know, it's the in the end, and this is one of the things for me as a comedian, you know, my other job, or my proper job, I think, or my main job, is when you write a stand-up show, you never have to finish it. Because if I perform it tomorrow and that joke I feel should go before the other one, or I need a new one to go in that gap,
just move it around, fix it up. Yeah.
I swap it around, I change it, I can make bits longer, shorter, pithier, punchier, ruder, and all that. But when you've signed off on a book, it's over. You can't do any of that. And I find that's the thing that really like keeps me awake at night as a writer, It's the fact I've got to sign off on the darn thing. There has to be a moment where it ends, rather than I'll do a stand-up show like for 150 times and it's never the same twice, and it doesn't, and there's no it doesn't have to be either. I could change it any way I like. But this, it's in black and white, game over.
So I only have 2 more questions, Bo, but I mean, I guess I definitely want to make sure that this one gets answered.
Okay.
Black Tuesday is a day of dominoes falling, right? And your answer to this question cannot be just read the damn book, like, buy the book. It can't be, right? But if we think about, sequences of battles where dominoes fall and they lead to the next thing, and everything has a consequence, right? So Grabner's attack on the Monday directly leads to the fact that they don't have enough ammunition to fight through the rest of the week.
Yeah.
What is the most important thing that does happen and the most important thing that doesn't happen?
The most important thing that does happen leads directly to the most important thing that doesn't happen. The most important thing that does happen is Roy Urquhart, when he embarks for Arnhem, tells his chief of staff what the order of succession should be in the event of his disappearance or death, or being ordered to combat. He does that without telling the brigadiers concerned what the order of succession is, but he does tell his chief of staff. And the thing about 1st Airborne Division is it is full of ambitious people who don't like each other at the top command level. None of them really like each other. Fierce rivalry. So that's the thing that does happen. He does come up with an order of succession, right? But the thing that then does, as a consequence, doesn't happen is his brigadiers don't know. And when the moment comes where there has to be a decision made about what to do next, in Urquhart's absence, because he has gone missing, and they think he's wounded or dead or captured, they don't know. They just don't know where he is, right? And they don't know if he's going to come back. They don't, he's gone, right?
Stop. Yeah.
So so then what doesn't happen is the blokes, the brigadiers left, who are having to decide what happens next, do not approach the business of making a decision about what to do next clear-headedly. And so the one thing that does happen sends us straight to the fact that when Brigadier Hackett arrives in divisional headquarters, he has an enormous argument with Brigadier Hicks, who's in charge. And Hicks is, what Hackett doesn't know is, what Hackett has found out is that Hicks is next in line in succession. Hackett doesn't like that because Hackett was made a brigadier before him by a couple of months, right? But that's not the point. It's the GOC's decision who's in charge. And so Hackett has an enormous row and then decides to proceed with basically proceed with the plan as was when they left England 36 hours ago, when everyone first set off for Holland. And because of Urquhart's decision to handle the command issue like that, what then doesn't happen is clear thinking and a clear grip on what to do next at midnight, 1 o'clock on the morning of Tuesday. And I think, Urquhart going missing is one thing, and a mistake, but also pure bad luck and pure contingency. If he'd waited 10 seconds more at one corner, he wouldn't have run around in, like it's literally like that. And this is one of the things I really love about this story is where, you can keep your longue durée. This is absolute split second stuff and personality, shaping events, which I think is really, really interesting. And Urquhart's absence is one thing, but his failure to have made sure that was something he had accounted for the possibility of, told the others, made sure everyone knew what was going on, is the one. I think all of the rest of the market garden, fine. Everyone rolls a dice. No plan survives contact with the enemy. The enemy has a vote. The weather has a vote. All those things. But that one decision to not tell the brigadiers is the absolute mega domino. Because had he been present in headquarters, who knows, he might have made a different decision. division headquarters. But had the brigadiers known about the succession, they probably wouldn't have argued about it. There probably wouldn't have been a source of animus for John Hackett, who was known to be fiery. Shan Hackett was known to be a fiery guy. He'd have come in and gone, right, okay, what are we actually going to do? Rather than, well, sod the lot of you, I'm going to do what I'm going to do anyway with my brigade. Too bad, I'm off. See you later. Basically what happens. And you know, the curious thing is that while they're arguing, it seems the two brigadiers agree that you know, there's a big problem. There's no one in charge in the town, and because they're so angry with each other, or so, it's so sort of stressed the conversation to have, they don't think to appoint anyone. And you're like, huh? Yeah. And it's all it. I like you know, what I love about this is it's just the tiniest thing, and I suspect that Urquhart, you know, and I don't know this, and of course you immediately get into the conjecture, and I suspect that one of the reasons Urquhart didn't tell them before he was setting off from Holland is he knew there'd been an enormous row, and he'd have to listen to them arguing with him again, and they'd be politicking against him because there's a lot of politicking going on in the division, particularly around his appointment, because they felt that he was from out, you know, he's from outside the airborne establishment. They didn't trust him, or didn't rate him, or didn't, you know, just didn't want him because he's not one of them. And that so there's your thing that does happen that results in a thing that doesn't happen. That's
perfect. Hey, Bo.
Yes, sir.
There's a playground here for Boohickey.
There is.
Yeah.
Now, man, when it comes to history in general, you know, there, like you said, you don't want to get into the weeds of conjecture. You don't want to get into mythology, and you know, and that's understandable because you could write another 3 volumes about that alone.
Yeah.
But what is something about Arnhem? What is something about Market Garden? What is something about Black Tuesday that people either get wrong or they continually produce this myth that you just need to bunker bust it?
The one thing that that really where you have to go, you need to think again about the way you've come up with that argument, is the drop zones are too far from the bridge, right? Landing zones are too far from the bridge. Those drop zones and landing zones are as close to the bridge as you can land what you're landing to attempt the thing you're attempting to do within the capabilities of the stuff you've got, the air crews you've got, and what the soldiers landing want to happen. You can't get any closer if you're trying to land an air landing brigade with all its equipment in gliders that have pilots who are good at flying gliders and other glider pilots who are not as excellent as their greater peers. Because what you do is you choose a big field, the skilled pilots go first, they land it in the corner, everyone else vectors on them, is the big idea, right? You can't, if that's what you want to do, because that's what you are going to do, because you can't do anything else, you need those enormous fields that are the other side of Easterbeek that are west of Arnhem. You can't do it south of the river. This all springs from, in the end, the army, I think in its heart, knew it had made a mess of things, and certainly missed out on a great opportunity for a decisive moment in the war, possibly. And so what do? You blame the RAF.
Yeah.
Right? You go
very quickly.
You go into service rivalry straight away. But when you read the account of the man who worked in photo reconnaissance in 38 group, a guy called Lawrence Wright, who briefed Urquhart on the landing zones. And he wrote this book in the 60s going, look, there's been a lot of stuff about this, but you know, if we're gonna argue about it, here's what I think happened. And I'm the bloke, you know, liaising between the army and the air force. So he goes to see Urquhart. Urquhart goes, you know, we cannot land anywhere else. If we're going to do it, we've got to land here. So we're going to land here, and it's going to cause us problems. But this is where we can't go anywhere else. And you know, and why they're landing in daylight, which is a thing everyone wants, because the landings on D-Day at night have been very, very difficult and create tons of friction that fortunately everyone's able to overcome, but mainly because they're relieved within 24 hours, right? Their artillery comes online within 24 hours and all that sort of stuff. So no one wants to land at night. So you're going to land at day, which means you can't land a coup de main party, for instance, at the bridge because that's where the flak is. Because of course there's flak there because it's the last bridge over the Neder Rhine, and the Germans aren't morons, right? The Germans are going to have flak on the last water obstacle in Holland before you get to Germany, right? Of course they are. So you can't put a glider party down there. And, there's an argument about that. And it's decided it's just too dangerous. The crews will all be killed. There's just no point trying, right?
We've even seen that argument play out in our series, Bo. I mean, we've had a lot of our guests have said they should have landed closer to the bridge, or they should have landed right at the foot of the bridge. And yeah,
they can't do it.
I can't wait to watch the comment sections on these.
There's the Magdeburgische Polder, which is to the. If you look at the map, it's south of the bridge and to the right. There are power lines there, so you can't get gliders in close. You could get parachute soldiers in there. Yes, but then they've still got to turn over the airfield at Deal and over where they think there's flak. There's flak at the bridge, right? There's flak at the bridge. So anyone coming in, so you've got to accept that flak risk. And maybe you're able to suppress it with tactical fighters, but maybe not. And their knowledge, and of course, this is me trying to look at it from the 10th of September. Their knowledge of the flak there is that there's flak there, and they're not prepared to risk the crews. The whole point of doing it at daylight is so it's all tidy and the lifts are tidy and under control and deliver the soldiers where you want them. Now, you could you could take the risk and land parachute soldiers south of the river, but what you can't land south of the river are gliders, right? Because it's tiny fields that are chopped up with raised dikes and gates on the top of the and fencing on the top of the dikes. How are you going to land? How are you going to vector lots of gliders into those tiny fields safely? You aren't. How are you going to unload them quickly? You aren't, right? And parachute soldiers, yes, you can dump a load somewhere, but particularly the British ones, they need their gliders with their anti-tank weapons in them and their ammunition and their field ambulance and their mortar rounds and their engineers to do, the sappers can land anyway, but they still need their equipment, which has to come by glider. So you've got to land the parachutists where you can land gliders, or in proximate to one another, or you would literally be putting the glider-borne guys down north of the river, over on those landing zones that we talked about, and then the parachute guys on the bridge, and they wouldn't if they ran into tanks, you'd be straight down to a Piat fight, which is not the ideal way to be fighting tanks, particularly in open country, which is what it was south of the river. So I just think they land as close as they damn well can, and they do as well as they do in terms of executing the army plan on the Sunday because of the drop zones and because the airlift goes perfectly. And also, Bob Kershaw in It Never Snows in September will point out, if you land nearer the bridge, you land nearer the bulk of the Germans' infantry strength.
Right.
Whereas if you land where they land, you're further. The Germans have got more organizing to do, so you buy yourself some time. So there you go. The drop zones are not too far from the bridge. They're as close as you can get, and that's the thing. You've then got to think. Well, then is that right? The right thing to do then? If that's as close as you can get, we sack it up.
And how does this play into it at all?
What?
Looking at hindsight, the Allies have superior numbers, have superior manufacturing. So your thought with Air Transport Command is, well, you lose a couple planes, you just replace them, and you can carry out all the subsequent lifts when the problem is a manpower crisis and an equipment shortage because you're 3 or 4 or 6 months behind in scheduling.
Yeah. That's a huge part of it. And the mini and so the landing zones and drop zones are where they are, but then there's the idea that you're going to do it in multiple lifts. And the problem with the multiple lifts, because you haven't got the aircrew, because you haven't got the stuff, because you haven't got the people, and also because it's that much further than Normandy. There's less daylight. You want to do it in daylight because you can. The 2 lifts means that whoever you land, and this is the problem Gavin runs into, the guys you land, half of them are going to have to stay behind to guard the landing zones and drop zones, rather than. So you're not concentrating force. You're just not immediately. And, Gavin has to hold a regiment back to defend drop zone T and, has the gunnery to do it and all that, right? When the Wehrkreis people attack, he can at least. But wouldn't that regiment be better spent?
Yeah, moving towards Grossbeck or moving towards the bridge. Yeah.
Yeah, rather than having to cover a great big wide open space for fear of, what might come out the Reichswald. And fair enough, for fear of what might come out the Reichswald. But he'd be able to draw his lines back to the high ground, sit on the Grossbeck heights and watch what's coming, right? Rather than have to actually defend it in depth. And both, Urquhart and Gavin's fundamental problems are the same, which are the result of the second lift. And if I think, because I always think with the big what if is, I always think with what ifs, you're not allowed to magic up another transport group. You're not allowed to do a glider coup de main because they've ruled that out. You're only allowed to do a what if within what they're actually capable of doing and comfortable with doing. And what you do is you do one lift, and then half of 1st Airborne Division is sat scratching its backside defending. Although they're not scratching, but they are. The Germans are attacking them. But their offensive power, and the air landing, our glider battalions are bigger. They're 3, not 4 companies. They've more riflemen in the companies. They've more staff. The anti-tank weapons are integrated, and all sorts of stuff because they all come by glider. You're actually the weighty end of the mace is staying behind to defend the drop zones rather than coming to the town and overwhelming the German blocking line on day one, which I think they would have done had they done that. Although, of course, change one thing, change everything. The German response would have been more ferocious. Maybe they'd have played, blah, 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 or tried to, but whatever. But that's the thing. It's the second lift that does for Gavin and that does for Urquhart. It really, I think.
See, Bo, I told you it'd be a playground for Boohiggy. Well, I just knew it. It felt right.
That's the appeal of this battle for so many people. And I'll confess, each time I read a new book about it, thinking, "Come on, lads, you can do it this time."
With all the things we've learned over the last 80 years, you should have gotten it together by now.
Exactly, by now, surely. Time machine me now. Get me back. And
so
I
Bo,
in the loft with Roy Urquhart. That's what
it is time for what's in your cup. Al, what do you have? What's in your cup?
Well, black coffee. I have an amazing coffee machine called a Mocha Master.
A little marketing here for you.
Thank you.
Felt right.
Hang on a minute.
Mine's
there he is.
Mine's a little bit more.
You got the problem though,
Yeah, that's great. That's a great mug, Bo. That's brilliant.
Thank you. It's the complaint department, and take a number. All you got to do is pull on that real hard.
I love it.
This is what my coffee's been spiked with a little bit of Evangeline's pralines and cream liqueur, and I still have to go do my proper job, so I can't drink too much because if I do, then my lecture is really going to be interesting.
I've been told to drink black coffee, but to not drink any more milk and things. So I've like pot of black coffee on the go all day, and it's even though I'm English and I should be brewing up, drinking tea and sitting around doing nothing.
Honest to God, Catherine and I, when we got back, we started ordering our coffee from the UK.
Really?
Just think it tastes better. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know, but
what's that all about? Oh boy.
It just tastes a whole lot better. There we go. Al, the book is Black Tuesday. Arnhem, Black Tuesday. It's out now. You can buy it on really any online bookstore from the UK.
Yeah.
It must be done. And my copy will be here in like 7 days. So a week from now, I'll finally be able to read about what happened on September 19th.
And then you'll do a special edition going, we had that guy on, and now I've read the book. The book sucks. What a waste of everyone's time. Sorry, everybody.
Well, Al, Bo, always a pleasure. This is the perfect moment, though, to remind everyone that Homebrew History is brought to you by Civil War Trails, the world's largest outdoor museum. Get out there, make some history of your own. Grab a picture with a sign and use the hashtag #SignSelfie when you tag Civil War Trails in that post on social media. It helps them to continue to spread the good word, spreading the gospel, not that one, just a different one, is as best as we possibly can about the world's largest outdoor museum. So Civil War Trails, make some history of your own. And this has been the final recording of Homebrew History's Market Garden 80 anniversary. We saved the best for last. Also, the schedule worked out this way.
Yeah.
But Al, a pleasure as always. It was great to see you. Bo, just absolute joy.
Always, of course.
And let's take it to the end credits.